Hi, friends. Welcome to this episode of the Start from the Heart Gratitude podcast. I have a very special guest with me today. If you're watching on YouTube, you probably recognize the last name at the bottom of the screen. Sounds very familiar to my last name. That is indeed my beautiful wife of almost 32 years. Laurieann and I met in high school. It's a real treat for me to have my favorite person in the world on the podcast with me today. So, Laura, nice to see you. She's coming to us all the way from about 40 feet away from me in the backyard.
I think I have a better space than you do at the moment.
I
It's a
think you do.
beautiful
I was
day.
I was looking at her on the screen before we started recording and thought I need to do more calls like this out there, like the backdrop.
Yeah, I know. It's like, no, I
So
don't want to switch.
that's all right. That's okay. We'll we'll
Uh,
we'll we'll stick with what we have. So none of what I'm doing is obviously possible without you. The love and support that you've given to me as we started the podcast, 5 or 6 years ago with our first episode down in San Diego with Ken Blanchard, where we went down there and had a
remember
great
that.
session and then a lunch with him and a few others. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of my time expressing my gratitude and love for you. I do that a lot. And I want our guests and our audience today to hear you, not hear me. So I'm
Mhm.
just going to start with that word gratitude. I mean, I can't think of gratitude without thinking of you and our family and all the things that I'm grateful for. But I want to ask you, just when you hear that word gratitude, first thing that comes to mind is what?
Wholeness and love, and this space, this being putting myself out there is a huge stretch for me. Unlike you, we are opposites that way, and it's not something that, well, it's just I'm stretching, and this is a stretch for me. But the word gratitude, when I heard you talk about doing a gratitude podcast, gratitude is something that I hold so much importance about that word and about everything that it encompasses. And the importance of it is so deep and ingrained in me, I guess, that I can't not talk about it. It's one of those things that I can't not do.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
You start your days, most days, in study and prayer and devotion. And
Mhm.
I know that that's who you are. Since I met you, 40 plus years ago, that's who you've been, but you seem to be even more that way lately as you've been studying. And I know we've had a lot of conversations in that backyard where you're sitting and in between throughout the house and everywhere about gratitude. Have there been things that you've been studying lately or stories from the Bible or anything that you've studied on your reading or prayer that comes up for you when you think about gratitude?
Yeah, so much. But, recently losing mom, before we lost her, I was really doing a deep dive into the 23rd Psalm. And I was about halfway through that deep dive when she passed. And I just recently finished that and wrote a lot about it. And it's really interesting because I always kind of equated that psalm growing up to funerals, people dying, and never really grasped why it was read from a standpoint of the living. It's just, I have so much gratitude, and I'll just share if you're okay, I would like to
Yeah,
just share just a couple parts of it right
definitely.
now that
Definitely.
are really on my mind, and just starting with the beginning. But it's, the Lord is my shepherd. And the meaning of that, in that David, who was a shepherd and who understood that role of a shepherd, is the writer, and he is declaring a relationship, and it's a very intimate relationship. And to have a shepherd is to be led, to be known, first of all, to be cared for, to be protected. And I think about that in my life, and I'm grateful for that relationship in my life. This psalm has really brought me into that deep meaning of this, of what's meant by the shepherd, the good shepherd, and visualizing in this metaphor him watching over us and the flock. And jumping ahead, the part that I'm really, really within that relationship and within that psalm today focusing on your rod and your staff, they comfort me, which it just has hit me in such a profound way, because his rod and his staff, it represents his protection and his guidance. And you think of a rod and a staff, and the rod was used by shepherds to fight off the predators. That's what a shepherd did. It represents his power to protect us. And it was used in a form that the sheep knew that they were safe. And his staff, if you picture a staff, I always want, the staff has the hook on it.
Right.
And the hook is there to kind of gently guide and to kind of pull away when there's danger or you're heading in a direction that isn't good for you. And I think about that correction, and I think about times in my life, and that's where I'm at, is looking at my life. I think when people pass, and especially people pass who are dear to you, it gives you some real reflection on your life and where you're at this point. For me, I've not been dwelling on mistakes I've made. I've been in gratitude for being able to look back and see where he has used his rod and where he has used his staff to gently pull me this way, or to pull us this way for our protection. And so often it doesn't feel like protection, because we can say that we surrender. We can say your will, not mine, but then something becomes uncomfortable, and we're just looking at the uncomfortableness of that and not what God might be doing in that discomfort. The discomfort of a job loss, the discomfort of losing a family member, that discomfort. Within that discomfort, there are things that happen. And, sometimes that correction feels kind of brutal. And, if you picture a sheep that's getting ready to step off a cliff, and what a shepherd would have to do is grab that sheep by the neck and pull it. It would not feel comfortable at all.
Yeah.
And I can look back in my life and know that I was making mistakes, and I can see it clearly. And I'm just so grateful that he redirected me. I'm so grateful that he loves me so much. He's going, let's get you back on the path, because of his deep love for me and his intimacy and knowing me. And his correction, unlike our human correction, right? Unlike our humanness when we're trying to point things out sometimes and help people. But his correction it's always motivated by love. Always. It's always motivated by love. It's motivated by protection. It's never about making us pay for our mistakes, as some might feel within a religion, right?
Right.
It isn't about making us pay for our mistakes. It's about guiding us back to the path of life, true life, and a life walking with him. And so, so that's it. And I'm not, it's not necessarily about anything specific, but I'm so grateful for where I am now, right? And I know and I recognize that my good shepherd in this personal relationship, he has known me my whole life. He has, from the time I was young, he has corrected me. He has protected me, and he will continue to do so until I'm home. And I think sometimes that's a challenge, to be grateful for that.
Yeah.
It's not comfortable. We can be praying for things and not even have any idea that this super uncomfortable situation that I'm in is actually an answer to prayer. He's trying to move me somewhere else. He's trying to move me in a direction to set me up for really giving me what I want. Sometimes what I want isn't the best thing for me, but a lot of times it is. And so I think of that like where we're at now. We're kind of in this unknown space. And I think we too need to examine sometimes, am I trying to force open a door that he shut? Because if he shuts a door, it's for a reason. And I think that's a question that we need to ask ourselves often in praying for his guidance and just being more in surrender.
And one of my guests the other day quoted the country song, Thank God for Unanswered Prayers. And I really like that. I've heard that a million times and I've heard the song and I could sing it. But yeah, oftentimes we pray, we try to guide the Lord where we want to go through our prayer rather than truly surrendering and asking.
Yeah.
So a lot of people can look back at the trials and the challenges that they've had in their lives and see the lesson well after the fact. What I've heard you talk about a lot in this conversation and prior to this conversation, just in our one-on-one conversations over coffee and what have you, is you seem to be able to see the value of the challenge while you're in it. How is that so easy? I don't say easy, but to you, more than most people I talk to, you see the value in the challenge during the challenge where most of us have to be through it to see it. How would you describe that?
Well, I would say it's because I've had a lot of challenges.
You've had enough that you've learned from that you now know.
I've had some self-inflicted, yes, and then some not self-inflicted from a very early age that had an impact on my life. But because I am able to look back and see, man, when I was in that, I had no idea how I would ever come out of it. I had no idea how, whether it was an individual thing or we had job loss or whatever the challenge was, I didn't have any idea how I was. But then looking back, I saw not just being out of it, coming out of it, but being better for it, better off, having learned a ton from it. And so when I'm in the middle of something, because I know that and I can look back and see that, I can know, and because I know that he is my shepherd and he is my good shepherd, he's doing something in it. He's working. And so I guess surrender has been the big word for me lately, is going through caregiving mom. I mean, we were caregiving mom. It was difficult figuring out how that getting help to caregive her because I couldn't do it 24/7. In the midst of that, were hit with employment challenge. That was actually a couple weeks before. A couple weeks before that, our grandson's in the hospital and he had been diagnosed with a genetic disorder that is an in and out of the hospital type thing, and daughter going through divorce. And at the same time of that happening, we were being hit on all fronts. And where I would be in helping out with the kids or the grandkids, or I'd be physically, everything had to be focused on mom. She had dementia. She was declining. She really could not take care of herself. And so it was this, okay, Lord, I don't know how, I really couldn't be there for you. I felt the way that I normally would, or the kids or the grandkids. And it was such an honor to take care of mom. So don't get me wrong here.
Right.
It was such an honor and also a burden at the same time. That's just the reality of that. So it was a nightly thing. I ended up getting into this routine. It was a nightly thing of no matter what the day was like, it was thank you for the day. Thank you for being in the day with me. Forgive me for, and whatever sins there were that always were. And then I surrender. I surrender today. I surrender tomorrow. And to surrender, that is to just say, I know you're working to answer the prayers for my family. I know you're working to answer all these other prayers as I focus where you've called me to focus right now. And he is. I mean, he did take care of, and he is continuing to take care of. But I have that faith because I've seen so much of it in my life. Does that make sense?
No, yeah, because you've learned from previous situations that may or may not be similar. And you've also learned something that I like that you're saying is that two opposite and extreme emotions can exist at the same time.
Absolutely.
That feeling of gratitude and surrender and peace combined with the despair of how are we going to pay for this, or how are we going to do this, or how am I going to get enough rest to take care of myself, because you had those needs as well and still do. So yeah, no, those are great lessons. I appreciate that. I appreciate you stepping way out of your comfort zone to come on with me today. I mean, it's something we've talked about really, gosh, since I started the initial podcast in 2019. I've been wanting to interview you, not just because I love talking with you, but also I think you have a lot to share. I know you say you're not out there, but you are in more ways than you know. Number one, I talk about you and the lessons I learned from you when I'm out in the community.
I'm okay not
Do
being
know.
out there. Don't
No,
get me wrong.
I know. Totally
Okay.
get that. Totally get that. But you are making more of an impact. Being out in the world doesn't mean you're making more of an impact than not being out in the world, because the impact you're making can be deeper with a few people, and that's much more profound than superficially out there with a lot of people. So the idea is to kind of lift where you are and be happy where you are and be serving where you are, regardless whether it's one person or a multitude. So I appreciate you, not just today and for being on here, but just in general. 32 years coming up in July of somehow you stuck with me and have stuck with me for 32 years. So thank you. And I love you and I appreciate you very much. And yeah, just appreciate the lessons you shared today. And I know there is somebody out there that needs to hear your message. And so, it goes back to just, whether it's one person who hears this or many, someone I'm confident needed to hear this message today. So appreciate you.
Appreciate you too and love you. And I it's very hard for me to get this next phrase out. I'm grateful that you had me on today.
Not editing that out. I start with that.
If I'm honest.
Yeah.
But it's just anyway.
Yeah.
And I don't know that this will be on or not, but I didn't want to interrupt you, but you talked about the feeling two different things at the same time. And I'm thinking of that in terms of grief, because like losing mom, I miss her so much. I miss her deeply. Now with dementia, I kind of was grieving and mourning, losing her a little at a time as I was missing pieces of her. But now that she's gone, I'm missing the mom pre-dementia, that's who I'm remembering the most. But at the same time, in that sadness, there is joy. There is absolute joy of the reunion that she has with the Lord and with Dad and my brother and it's in her. It's just that reunion, just feeling her joy. So I just have this joy and this sorrow, this sadness, not sorrow, sadness at the same time.
Coexist. Yeah.
They coexist. Yes, they do.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to ask you one last question that I normally reserve just for my long form podcast. Laurieann, what's in your heart?
It's just love. Love. Be love. What does love look like here? What does love look like in this situation? What does love look like with this person? What does love look like in this really hard situation or with this really difficult person?